Alright guys, time for another game theory video. Remember, if you like the videos, like, sub, silly, comment, share, support the channel if you want to. So I did this recent tier list of Carno's Revenge, and just because there's a comment from a dude that plays Carno's Revenge that he thinks Mastorius is probably a bit higher because of matchup specificness, whatever. My English is bad, right? And I would say that, I'll call this video the tale of two tier lists, right? Because I definitely think, so the tier list I made is just like sort of generalized tier list, right? Of a video game, right? And I'm trying to, this is going to be about all fighting games, so not just Carno's Revenge, but I do think that matchup tier lists are also useful. I think you should actually use both. I think you should take both into consideration. You should take in the general kind of tier list of a game, like what I put out, and I think you should also, there should be weight of a tier list based on matchups as well. But I think this gets into a problem of, and I've said this before, I think there's a lot of sensationalism in fighting games to make things more extreme than they are potentially. So you take this thought and idea that I constantly say. Most people are not good enough to talk about video games, okay? Most people, their opinion on how video games work, calling a spade, it's not relevant. You're not good enough to talk about games, okay? Again, very rare to meet someone who is actually good at games. Very rare to meet someone who can talk about games. And it's even more rare to meet someone who can do both, okay? And not just generalized tier lists that I gave, matchup specificness and all this kind of stuff, that is even potentially more nuanced, right? Because we're not even just generalizing to get a general grasp or feel of the game. We're getting into like the more nitty gritty of matchups, and there's so much sensationalism, right? And I've always used this example of Super Turbo, right? Back in the day, Ryu versus ehonda was considered something like Ryu wins 6.5 to 3.5 ehonda, right? It's a bad matchup, Ryu wins, right? And it is so insane to me, and this is what I'm talking about, over the years as Super Turbo has progressed, Ryu is not the character that the meta has constantly improved him per se. Option selects and all these other things that are not how the game was played back in the day. You know what I mean? And again, I've said this before, don't get me wrong. You can play old school Street Fighter, and there's a lot of newer school people, or even, I guess it'd even be older, whatever it might be now. You know what I mean? But there's that, newer school player who is only about math problems and everything like that. And they're much more of that option select kind of person, math problem thing. Like, I do this setup, this is what happens, this is what happens, this is what happens. But they never really learn to play the game. But it is certainly true that as Super Turbo has progressed, and some of these other games have progressed, but for this specific argument of Ryu versus ehonda, ehonda is the one whose meta has improved since Super Turbo came out. So when I see people post nowadays that Ryu versus ehonda is 8-2 in ehonda's favor, does that make sense to anybody? Do you get what I'm getting? That is sensationalism, like trying to make it seem more exciting when ehonda wins. That is bullshit. Do you realize how bad 8-2 is of a matchup if you're actually thinking about it? 8-2 is basically, unwinnable, pretty much, okay? And if you know anything about Super Turbo, motherfucker, if you've actually watched the game, watched Japanese play, whatever, do you remember, I don't want to say their names, and I've used this example before because I'm not trying to throw shade saying I'm better than anybody, but have you seen some of the top Ryu players in America before say that Ryu versus ehonda is 8-2? And have we all seen the Japanese absolutely destroyed these guys with ehonda? Do you ever watch the Japanese play Super Turbo? Do you notice how many of these matchups that people are saying 8-2, the character that supposedly can only win 2 out of 10 games regularly wins? That's sensational. That's why it's very hard to even take these matchup tier lists seriously. You know what I mean? Because people, again, I said character apologists in the last video, or sensationalism. You've gone from saying, man, I still got some of that COVID, I guess, dude. You've gone from people saying that a matchup that Ryu wins is now a matchup that is unwinnable. And that's just ridiculous, right? I mean, I don't even know how people, some of the matchup tier lists that I see, I don't even know how you can take them seriously. Because they're so ridiculous and just to make things seem extreme. And again, it's crazy because ehonda's the one that's gotten better. So if ehonda's gotten better as the years have gone on, how is the match even worse? You know what I mean? Yeah, okay, Ryu's a counter character, but, you know, Jesus Christ, you know, stop acting like it's unwinnable. The matchup has not gotten worse for you throughout the years. And that goes for in general, right? So even the guy was saying, you know, maybe tier list matchup wise, Mysterious might be higher on the tier list. And, you know, again, you think about matchup wise and it's like, well, and I feel like I'm kind of cynical about this. It's like, exactly how are we judging these matchup tier lists? Are we judging them on human error? How much human error is allowed when we're thinking about this, right? Because again, if we go back to the Karna's Revenge example, I've said Karna's Revenge is a game that has kind of two kind of specific ideas of how you can see the game is played, right? There's that really lame kind of way. There is more of a deceptively, potentially skillful aspect of the game, and there is that scrub-a-dub kind of factor, right? So if you look at the tier list, if we're doing a matchup tier list, say for Mizuguchi or something like that, Mizuguchi is a character that sucks in terms of laming you out. So if we're thinking there's no human error whatsoever, Mizuguchi would get lamed out all the fucking time. But you got to give a little bit of a human error, right? You should definitely, within reason, imagine the game is being played optimally. But there has to be just a smidge, at least a smidge of human error, right? Because if we take that smidge of human error of Mizuguchi and coin flipping sometimes, and then we're adding to that coin flip the idea that the person is playing Mizuguchi, me. Whatever, that's my stupid laugh there, dude. Beating the Japanese, right? All this kind of shit. You know what I mean? If we add in some of that human error, if we add in the executional ability, whatever, to actually pull off these random confirms and aim dizzy spots, you have a character that is then stronger, right? And so, and even I've said before, matchup tier list though, it doesn't matter what I've done even in a game like Karna's Revenge. I don't know if I could accurately make an entire matchup tier list of Karna's Revenge, right? I just don't think I have that knowledge for every character to do it accurately. And I think that's probably the unfun answer because obviously people like looking at tier lists. Hell, fucking people like watching people that don't even know how to fucking play video games and pretending that they know how to play or they know what they're talking about, right? So it's fun because obviously even I remember as a kid like, oh, I don't know anything about this game, or I know just a little bit of this game, or I have a grasp of it, and I want to see what other people think about the game. And when you have a hobby in something, when you enjoy a hobby, you also want to see what other people say about your hobby. So of course, it's interesting if you like video games, if video games are your hobby, you want to see what other people's opinion about your hobby are and who is good at the hobby, who is good in the game, blah, blah, blah. So I understand people liking tier lists, but the problem is it's so hard to have an honest conversation about video games because, again, most people can't talk about games. They're not qualified to talk about them. And then we're not even sure what are the exact rules and stipulations for the tier list, right? Because I can tell you again, and I use those super turbo tier lists, I can't take those seriously, right? I mean, they're hard to take seriously when you see people talking about that. Because it's like, I guess we're just not taking human error into account whatsoever. And it's like, it's kind of that iffy ground because it's like, yeah, you know what I mean? I agree that you got to think about a game being played optimally within reason though as well, right? Do you get what I'm saying? And you know, even that Ryu ehonda, I keep going back to this example. A lot of times when I talk about certain matchups or characters that are in a similar tier placement, not that Ryu and ehonda are necessarily in a similar tier placement, but just saying them butting heads in a matchup, I often will go with, you got to give some credit to a character that does more damage, because there's always going to be potentially some mistakes. You should be trying to be playing the game optimally, but there's going to be a little bit of mistakes here and there, dude, right? So how much, again, weight are we giving to human error, etc.? And even, you know, we're talking about people, you know, talking about the stuff I've done in Guilty Gear or these other games. This stuff would never happen in real matches, and we've seen how games have progressed. And, you know, again, going to like a game like Guilty Gear, you know what, a Kai, just look at the Kai impossible combo, you know, and still, until people start doing that shit, and I know I can do it. If I can do it, and I barely play fucking video games, if you're playing a game seriously, you should be fucking doing it, right? Kai impossible combo. You know, that's kind of like, you got to be going to trying to play the game optimally. So I agree, you know, give some weight to imagining the game being played optimally, but you got to give a little bit of, at least a little bit of a smidge to human error, right? So Tale of Two tier lists, I think they're all important, right? You know what I mean? But I think it's easier to generalize a tier list, which already some people are going to lie about in the first place. Let's not act like people aren't going to lie about a generalized tier list like I made in the first place. But when you do matchup tier lists, which again, I do agree are important and you should use both, people are going to have a tendency to lie even more. And that is the problem. Remember, if you like these videos, like, sub, silly comment, share, support the channel if you want. Thanks.